Hey there, it's Mitzi. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm sharing the 23 best books of 2023. So today I wanted to share my favorite books from 2023. And as I was going through my reading journal and looking at my favorites, pulling out the best of the best, I decided to divide it into categories. And so I'm going to try to remember to timestamp in case you want to look at a certain genre or category for each one you want to fast forward. Feel free to do that. I'll try to remember to timestamp in the description box. But I decided to just go through and share my favorite middle grade and my favorite classics and that kind of thing. And as I was writing them out, there was actually 23 books on this list. And so I said, okay, yep, I'm not going to rethink this. It's meant to be. I'm going to share these 23 books because it's 2023. And I thought that would be the favorites of 2023. So that's why I just didn't even overthink it. And because I was, there was a couple of books that could have been honorable mentions and that kind of thing. I said, no, I'm stopping here. And as I say this, I may have counted wrong. It may not even be 23 books. But I think that there are 23 books that happen to be on this list of the best books for 2023. Oh, and the other thing I want to say is these are books that aren't necessarily published in 2023. These are my favorite books read in 2023 because I don't read a lot of new books. I think there might be one book that was published in 2023 on this list, and that book is a bind-up of an older short story collection. It's just in a new edition. So technically that really doesn't even count for 2023, but it is on this list. So anyway, these are my favorite books that I read in 2023. So here we go. I'm going to start with the middle grade. The first one that I want to mention is The Mysterious Benedict Society. This is a mystery and it is also a series. There are several books in this series. My son Caleb read this when he was in middle school, I think. It was a popular book at the time. And he read through these and he kept telling Elijah, my younger son, to read it, but he never did. So this past year, I think we were at Second Charles or something, and I picked one up, and I had already found one, I think, at a little free library or something. And I said, I really want to read this series. And he said, well, Caleb had told him to read it, so we could buddy read. And so we tried that this past year. We buddy read the first one, and both of us enjoyed it so much that we decided to continue the series. But we're going to take our time, and we're going to try to buddy read that together. So I don't know when I'll get to the next one. But we both really enjoyed the first one. Again, it's a middle grade mystery, and it's filled with quirky little characters, and there's puzzles to figure out, and there's a mystery along the way. It was fast paced, and I really enjoyed that one. So that was a favorite, and a favorite surprise for a series too. The next one on my list is All of a Kind Family. This was a wonderful surprise. It's about a Jewish family. There's several girls in the family, and it's just the day-to-day. It's one of those comfort type reads. If you like middle grade about family and encouraging good family relationships, this is a great one for that because the family solves the problems together. I really loved this one. I think this is a series too. I think a couple of you mentioned that this was a series. So I'm going to check my library and see, and hopefully I can continue that if that is the case. But I highly recommend All of a Kind Family. Now this one was a surprise for me. I think this was the group read for middle grade March last year, and it was called A Rover's Story. And I didn't know based on the cover and the premise if I would like it, but I was drawn into this one from the first page. I love the perspective. It's told from the perspective of the rover, and I loved that perspective. It was a totally different premise, and it's about his experience learning how to communicate with the people, as well as go on this mission and do this important mission in space. And I highly recommend that one. And that was quite a surprise. Another delightful read was The Children of Noisy Village. This is written by the same author of the Pippi Longstocking series. And I happened upon this book because of the cover. I thought it was super cute and I tried it. It's about these 3 farms that are right together in Noisy Village and the 6 Swedish children that live there in the village, and it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that one. But my favorite middle grade for 2023 hands down was Coraline. I really enjoyed that experience. It has all the gothic and creepiness that I like, but not over the top scary. Of course, it's middle grade, so it was a little creepier than I thought it would be, because I have seen the Tim Burton version from years ago, and that is more cartoonish than the book is. It's not scary, but it was a little creepier than that. Now, I am a Tim Burton fan. I know, there's mixed reviews about his work, but I think he's super creative, and I like gothic, sort of creepy, but not too scary. So I enjoy Tim Burton because he gives me just enough without scaring my pants off. So I do like that, but that was really a surprise. I do plan on reading that one again. Now on to historical fiction favorites, and so I'm surprised at this because I only have 3. I think I'm becoming a lot more critical in my historical fiction because it is a favorite genre, and I'm always looking for the perfect historical fiction. So I only have 3 on this list. The first is The Book of Lost Names. I checked this one out from the library on a whim. I think someone told me about it and I checked it out, and I really enjoyed that book. I liked that there was this mystery behind this book of lost names, and I liked that there was a librarian. Of course, I loved that. And the female main character was such a strong character. I enjoyed that too about it. Another favorite was Secrets of a Charmed Life by Susan Meissner. I love Susan Meissner. Now, I read another Susan Meissner this year, her newest, and I didn't enjoy it quite as much. This one was much better. I did enjoy the other one, but this one was by far a lot better than that one. Secrets of a Charmed Life. It is a dual timeline, but Susan Meissner does a good job with dual timeline. Usually when I read those, I'm not interested in the contemporary timeline, but in this one I was interested with both timelines, and I was drawn in. It was about 2 sisters during the Blitz in World War II, and it was very interesting. I enjoyed that. That was a favorite. But my favorite by far was The Kitchen House. I don't know why I have never read this book before, but it is one of the best historical fiction books I've ever read. It was perfect for me. It's about an Irish indentured servant who comes over on a ship to America in the early 1800s, and she finds herself orphaned, and she ends up on a slave plantation in the South. And so she is raised by the slaves there on this plantation in the kitchen house. And the premise is just fascinating because, you have an indentured servant who is being raised by the slaves. And so she has a different connection, a different relationship with the people in the main house. And there's also another layer of the slaves and the sort of hierarchy that's on the slave plantation, with certain slaves being treated a little differently if they work in the house, the ones that work in the kitchen, and then as well as the ones that work on the plantation in the cotton fields. So everyone is at different levels and are treated differently in the story, both the slaves as well as this little Irish indentured servant. And so I found that to be very interesting about the story. But I also have to say that one of the things I loved about it was it dealt with some really horrible things. Some horrible events take place in this book, but the way that she handled it, she didn't go into such detail that it celebrated those events, but she gave us enough that we knew exactly what was going on, as well as conveying the emotion of those horrific experiences. So I can't recommend that one enough. The Kitchen House was by far my favorite historical fiction for the year, and one of my favorite historical fiction of all time. Okay, so now on to mysteries. One of my favorites this past year actually was a bind-up that was published in 2023, and that is Autumn Chills. This is a short story collection by Agatha Christie, and they have just bound up different short stories in these seasons. And so I have the whole collection now, but this one is my favorite from the whole collection. And this was just a great blend of short story mysteries by Agatha Christie for me. Sometimes I'm not that big into some of her short stories, but I really enjoyed this one. This was a favorite, and it was a great surprise. I read it during the autumn, and it was a fun one to read then. I also loved The Unexpected Mrs. Polyfax. Now this is more espionage than it is mystery. It's about Mrs. Polyfax, who is retired and she's a widow, and she is just like not sure what she wants to do with the rest of her life. And she decides she wants to be a spy. She goes to the CIA and accidentally she becomes a spy for the CIA. And it's just a fun little story about Mrs. Polyfax. She is witty and strong and just a clever girl. And I really enjoyed Mrs. Polyfax. And I have been reading some others in that series, but that one was the first and it was a great surprise. Now the next three are the Cider Shop Mysteries. There are 3 books in this trilogy. It's a series, and unfortunately there are only 3 because I loved every single one of these. This one was the perfect cozy mystery series for me. It's set on an apple orchard. I love anything about apples and orchards, so that was perfect. It has this wonderful grandma, and her friends are eccentric and funny. And it has a fainting goat, and there are cats named Dolly and Kenny, after Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers. And they are the greatest duo of all time. So this one was just a wonderful cozy mystery with all of the elements that I love in a cozy mystery, and I'm sad that that one is over. And I read all 3 of them pretty much back to back. I had one, I had to wait till they came in, but I really loved that series, and I wish that there were more in that one. But if you haven't read it, the Cider Shop Mysteries is a great cozy read. Now the next one's a surprise for me, because it's a Murder, She Wrote book. This is one way down in the series of the Murder, She Wrote series. There was some sort of a readathon last year, and I decided on a whim to participate. I checked this book out from my library. It's called A Slaying in Savannah. I think what I loved about this was the nostalgia of Murder, She Wrote, as well as the setting in Savannah, because I'm very familiar with Savannah. I love Savannah. It's not far from where I live, Savannah, Georgia. And so this was just a great blend of the nostalgia of Murder, She Wrote, as well as Savannah being a familiar place. But I did think that after reading this that I did want to read some more Murder, She Wrote. So if you've read a favorite Murder, She Wrote in that series, I'm not planning on reading that whole series because there's a gazillion of those books. But if you do have a favorite, let me know, because I really enjoyed that one. And I hope that they will have the Murder, She Wrote readathon again this year. But hands down, my favorite mystery for 2023, and you may have already guessed this since I haven't mentioned this book yet on the list yet, that is A Caribbean Mystery by Agatha Christie. This is a Miss Marple. It's on down in the Miss Marple series, and it was just the perfect read. I read it in the summer, and I can still remember sitting out on the back patio reading this and just laughing at the wit of Miss Marple. This one showcases Miss Marple's personality better than any of the others. I love the conversations in this. I loved the mystery, the setting. It was the perfect mystery for me, and I am so glad that I was able to read the Miss Marple series last year. I had started it the year before, and I finally finished all the Miss Marple series last year. But that was my favorite, and I've ranked those. If you're interested, I'll leave a link below if I remember. Sometimes I forget to do that. But if I remember, I'll leave a link to, or in the cards, my ranking of the Miss Marple mysteries, because they're fantastic. If you want to see my ranking on that, if you're interested. Okay, so now on to the classics. My favorite classics for 2023. The first is Chronicles of Avonlea by Lucy Maud Montgomery. This is a collection of short stories. There are 2 in this collection. There's Chronicles of Avonlea, and then there's Further Chronicles of Avonlea, and I'm still reading through that one. I'm just gradually reading a short story when I can get a chance. It just sits on my nightstand, and when I can get to it, I'm reading a short story in that collection. I love Lucy Maud Montgomery's short story collections. And this one just stood out for me. It was a favorite. But I am a short story person. I know a lot of people aren't, but if you think about Lucy Maud Montgomery, if you read her works, most of her books are short story collections. They may have an art to them, but her books are written in a way that each chapter seems kind of like a short story to me. There's just the way that she writes her stories seems to me that she started off writing the short stories, and then, like Anne Shirley, became a character that was in a lot of these short stories, and I think she sort of created these books based on Anne Shirley using that idea. I don't know if you agree with that. Let me know in the comments if you've noticed that. But she is a great short storyteller, and if you enjoy short stories, I highly recommend all of hers, but this one really stood out for me. It's Chronicles of Avonlea, and I really enjoyed that one. The next one on this list is called A London Child of the 1870s. This is a series. Now, the collection I have, there's 3 of the series. I think there might be one more after that, but I found this, set at a thrift store, and there's A London Child of the 1870s, and then we have Girl of the 1880s, and then I think London House of the 1890s in my collection. But I do think that there's one more. This is the first, though, The London Child of the 1870s, and I read this as a companion to Victober. During October, when we celebrate all the Victorian literature, I decided to read this alongside what I was reading, and it was such a surprise at how much I loved it. In fact, I loved it so much, I decided I would kick off January with the next one, and I'm reading it right now, and I just can't wait. I have it on my nightstand, and I can't wait each night to pull that out and read another chapter. It's so good. I'm really enjoying that one. The next 2 are James Herriot books. I read 2, All Things Bright and Beautiful and All Things Wise and Wonderful. I'm not going to say too much about those because I've already reviewed all of these books, but those 2 are just the next in the series, the James Herriot series. I think that they were originally separate books, so instead of these 2 bind-ups, I think those are actually 4 books that have been bound differently. But I love James Herriot. They're kind of the kind of books that you want to just stretch out and read over and take your time reading over a long period of time. One of you mentioned that you just had it on your nightstand and you would read like a different chapter each night, and I've started doing that with James Herriot, and I did that with the second one, All Things Wise and Wonderful, and that was a wonderful experience too. So I do recommend just taking your time and enjoying just the fun stories that he tells, because there are some funny things, there's some sad things too, but overall it's just a heartwarming series, and I'm really enjoying that. So those were 2 favorites. The next one is Little Dorrit by Charles Dickens. I'm trying to read at least 2 Charles Dickens a year, and this past year in 2023 I happened to read 3 Charles Dickens, and there are 2 on this list. But Little Dorrit was a great surprise. I loved the characters in that one. I loved Little Dorrit, and I have meant to, for several months now, to post a full review on that. So I will be doing it. I'm not going to talk too much about that here because I want to make a full review video separately for each one of the Charles Dickens books I read. And I've been doing pretty good at that until I hit Little Dorrit, and that didn't happen. So hang on, I will be posting that hopefully soon. But Little Dorrit was a favorite classic for 2023. I also read Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. This was fantastic. I cannot believe I haven't read this one. I think Far from the Madding Crowd had been on my TBR the longest out of anything else that I read this past year. So I was so glad to get that read finally, and I can't believe I hadn't read it. It was a wonderful story, and I did post a full review of that one. Another favorite was The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope. This was the group read for Victober, and I'm so glad that it was, because I'm not sure when I would have actually read this one. I mean, I have lots of Anthony Trollope on my shelf already that I haven't read, and so I actually had to order this book, and I'm so glad that I read it. It was such a wonderful kickstart to Victober. In fact, I started it a couple of weeks before Victober, and it just set my Victober off to a great start. And I think I have talked a little bit about that one. I don't know if I did a full review. If I didn't, I'll try to do that too, because it's a great book as well. Of course, it's a great book. It's a favorite on this list. I highly recommend The Way We Live Now. But hands down, my favorite classic for 2023 was Dombey and Son by Charles Dickens. I started the year off reading this in January, and this one just brings back so many wonderful memories because I buddy read this with Janelle from Too Fond of Books, and she passed away this past year. But we spent the first 2 months of last year reading this book together, and we would every couple of days touch base and chat about the book and other things, and it was just a wonderful experience. And so that made it extra special too, because Janelle was such a great buddy reader, and I'm so fortunate that we were able to buddy read this masterpiece together, because I think Dombey and Son is a masterpiece. I was just amazed by that book, and so was Janelle. We both loved that book, and as we read it, she would just bring out things I had not thought about. I would bring out things that she hadn't thought about, and it was just a wonderful reading experience. But the book also is a wonderful book as well, so I highly recommend Dombey and Son, and I've already done a full review on Dombey and Son, so I'll try to remember to link that too. But Dombey and Son was my favorite classic for 2023, and it was also my favorite book for 2023. It was my favorite read for 2023, hands down. It was the best book that I read. Unfortunately, there were a lot of duds in 2023, as there always is as you go along. You just have to keep reading and find those treasures. But I'm happy with 23 books on this list that were favorites, and I do plan on reading all of these at some point again. So let me know in the comments if you've read any of these, and let me know what your favorite book for 2023 was as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.